Well, it's day 4. For you, it might not be day 4. You might be going slower or faster than we're going, but this is like the recommended pace. This should be your 4th day or the beginning of your 2nd week. So far we've talked about simple random sampling, and that's randomly choosing individuals to, in a systematic way so that we don't omit a certain part of the population or a certain part of the sampling frame. We don't systematically omit some part of the sampling frame. We're thinking the sampling frame is representing the population is the best list we can get of the population we're interested in. A sampling process which systematically omits some part of the population or some part of the sampling frame is called biased. Good sampling avoids bias. Why do we want to avoid bias? We want to make sure that the information we're presenting is representative of the population. We only use part of the population, so we must use a part of the population that has all the components of the population in it in about those same proportions, so we can draw conclusions. Most sampling frames systematically omit part of the population, so the sampling frame itself can introduce some bias. That's life, that's all we can do. So we talked about simple random sampling. Now we're going to talk about other good sampling techniques. Here's one of them. It's called stratified sampling. Break the sampling frame into groups of similar characteristics and perform a simple random sample from each group. So we would do that to make sure we have people or objects with certain characteristic in the sample. So if we were, say, sampling humans, we want to make sure we might have equal numbers of men and women contained in our sample. So we would divide the sampling frame into men and women, and then we would sample equal numbers of individuals from each group, men and women, and we do that sampling in a random way. So we do simple random sampling in the 2 groups. So here's an example. Suppose you wanted to sample 5 men and 5 women from a group that had 783 women and 549 men. Those turn out to be good numbers for our sampling process that uses random digits. What we don't want to have, if we don't want to use a lot of lines in the tables, we'd like these first numbers to be big numbers. Well, here they're luckily big numbers. That'll help us out. And then we go over to the random number table. Here it is. And we pick a starting place for the men. I just picked this place here. And so men. And we picked a different starting place for women. I just picked this place here. And since the groups are using 3 digits each, like that, we block off 3-digit blocks. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and see what that looks like. So here we go. Okay. So it doesn't really matter which part of those tables of numbers you use for your 3-digit blocks. I just randomly, I just chose some block positions. And then for the men, it's 001 through 549. That's what we're looking for. And I'm trying to find 5 men. So we come in here, there's one there, one that 549 is our biggest number. So it looks like we have 421, that's in that range, 333, 323, 502, and then 301. Okay, so we did that. And then we look at the women. There's 783 women. So for the women, we're going to go 001 through 783. Let me back this up a little bit more. I can slide this up. Maybe like that. There we go. So now we're looking at 3 digits. So I'm thinking this one here that's 231. So 231 is in the list. So there's one. 984 is too big. What are we looking for? 783. So here's one. Here's one. Here's one. Here's one. So there's 5. 231, 262, 548, 312, and 457. So that's all there is to stratified sampling. We might call it stratified random sampling. We break your sampling frame or your population into 2 groups or more groups if you wanted to of similar characteristics to make sure you get those characteristics in your sample, and you sample randomly from each of the strata, as you might call it. So stratified. And then you'd have to decide, well, how many should I pick from each? Well, that's a problem. Ordinarily, you try to pick according to the fraction of those groups in the overall population. So on this list, we happen to get more men than women on our list, but chances are probably we're trying to get equal numbers of men and women. That's what we think is present. If we didn't think that, maybe we take 5 men and 7 women to kind of reflect the numbers that we saw. So there we go. And now what I do is I stop this recording and we'll start a new one with our next sampling method.